I just came back from Fox News where I had the I don't know if it was a pleasure or not, but I had the interesting it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it, but it was a weird question. They're trying to arm teachers down there in Texas, and I of course was arguing against it. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Stuebenville. I want to talk about what the Supreme Court has done this week or will do on the question of marriage equality. And with all of that, I'm going to be talking with Danielle. Now, you know Danielle. She is with Talking Left with Danielle and Shane. That occurs right before the Raucous Caucus on Sunday mornings. Danielle, it's the first time for me to have you here on the Inside Scoop. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
It's a real pleasure. It's nice to combine We Act radio hosts and get us together talking to each other, so it's a real pleasure. So I want to talk about all these topics. First, let me wish you a happy Easter, and thank you for coming on, despite the fact that it is Easter, so I really do appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Happy Easter to you as well, and yes, it's always nice to connect with our fellow We Act family members.
Let me start with just the question that I just got through arguing with on Fox. Nice to talk with a progressive radio host instead of the right-winger that I did before. But this is arming teachers in schools. Now, to me, this sounds like a really stupid idea. I remember, when I was a kid, even kids putting a tack in a teacher's chair as a prank. Now, I certainly am not proposing that, but when you think about guns, a silly prank or stealing the teacher's apple or pens or whatever could become something really dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just think about the statistics of how many people who own guns get self-inflicted injuries or end up accidentally shooting a friend, a family member. Think about, even when these guns are stored in a place that a parent believes is safe, yet we see kids accidentally shooting one another. Why would we want to increase the likelihood of something like that to happen?
Yeah, a close friend of mine teaches at inner city school in New Orleans, and she had her computer locked up in her desk, and a kid or someone broke into her desk and stole the computer. And obviously, my friend wasn't very happy with that. But if they'd stolen a gun, that would have been a completely different question.
Yeah, it's a little more difficult to seriously injure or kill somebody with a computer. I'm sure it could be done.
You have to hit them really hard with one of those unbreakable things, but that'd be really... So, the other thing is I tried to ask them, hey, where would the teacher carry the gun? They wouldn't quite answer my question. I said, would it be in their desk? Because I mentioned the break-in at my friend's school. No, it'd be on their person. Okay, where? Because if it's a holster... I know that kids do things behind teachers' backs all the time. You pass notes. People sometimes throw things. Again, I'm not justifying it, but this goes on in school. Not every 4th and 5th grader knows what's in their best interest. And kids and teachers have to give their backs to kids. They're helping a kid with their math homework, or they're looking over their paper to see they have a question. And now the teacher has to be worried about someone stealing their gun at the same time. When did teachers become police officers? Why can't they just be teachers?
Well, and even with the best of intentions, I mean, teachers are already overworked and underpaid.
That's
You'll have
true.
One teacher dealing with 30 to 40 kids.
That's true.
Do you really want that to be the person who is deciding whether or not your child may live or die?
Yeah, no, it's really a bad idea. But again, that's what I came from. I just wanted to put that to rest. By the way, I'll be showing that clip on my website at marklevinetalk.com as soon as I get home and stick it up there so people can check it out there and comment as well. Danielle, that's not actually the main reason I invited you here today. The main reason, and I want to talk a little bit later on in the broadcast about the Supreme Court's oral arguments, but the main reason I want to talk with you is about Stuebenville, because it strikes me as something that's a really difficult subject. Here you have some football players who were sort of the stars of their team, mercilessly rape a young woman who was so drunk that she really had passed out. And then not only do they do this horrific crime to her, but other kids who are watching, and this is the part I think it's even more surprising. I guess I can imagine that bad people rape and do violence to other people, but other kids watched, made fun of the victim, passed around the picture on social media, and actually, I don't think they meant to do this, but through their horrific passing it on, gave the information the police needed to arrest and convict these football players. How do you come at this story? How do you come at the culture of violence that occurs to women all across this country, and how do you persuade 16-year-olds to know better, I guess?
Well, to know better, I say certainly starts with the upbringing, and I don't like to blame everything on parents by any means, but there is some level of whether or not violence is taught is accepted when somebody is growing up. But I think culturally, as a whole, you termed it correctly. Everybody keeps using this rape culture term. And whether or not it's correct, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that matter. But violence culture is certainly correct. And it's not just blaming the violent video games or the media. It's the fact that we think it's funny when somebody falls and gets injured. It's why kids crowd around the fight in school. It's why, even from cartoons to boxing to, so many quote-unquote American institutions are centered around violence. You add that with the fact that less than 100 years ago, women were basically property and
right.
have been for millennia.
Right.
How those 2 points go together, I think, is what ends up creating situations like these.
And, of course, football is a violent sport, probably one of the most violent, I guess, outside of boxing. I mean, people knock each other silly, get concussions, and there is this culture of hitting hard and being violent. And I somehow, I don't know how easy it is to leave that violence on the field. I mean, we have people in the military who suffer post-traumatic stress who are having trouble. They have a role of violence as well, and they come home from Iraq or Afghanistan, and they have a hard time separating that. I'm sure there are football players that have a hard time separating, compartmentalizing, if you will, the allowed violence versus the unallowed violence. My question, I guess, goes not even to them, but to the other kids. Like you said, the kids that might crowd around a fight. I do remember clearly 5th grade with fight, right? And everyone crowds around, and very few kids are trying to separate the two. The teacher may jump in and try to separate. It's usually 2 boys fighting each other, though not always. Sometimes it's 2 girls, or a boy and a girl. But the kids are cheering for who they want to win the fight. There almost none of them that I can remember from my middle school years are actually coming in to separate the two from hitting each other. Why do you think that is? I don't know if you have an answer, because I don't.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think it's just so ingrained. I mean, think back, historically Roman times of gladiators and
sure.
Fighting lions. I mean, you're dealing with, 1,000 years of violence being acceptable form of entertainment.
Right.
And then today, it's, you can't blame the video games, you can't blame the television shows, but you can blame them for desensitizing us to it. Just seeing it over and over again, and it's not real. It's entertainment. You don't have to feel like that person is a victim or like you're responsible for what may happen to them because it's on a television screen. How do we separate that? How do we educate children to know the difference between that and reality? And then plus, I mean, come on, school, we've all been there. There's the groups, there's the jocks, there's
right.
the nerds, there's the social stratosphere of just everybody fitting in their little place, and how all of those things relate together. It's a recipe for these kind of situations. They used to just be, okay, a fight in the hallway or somebody picking on the poor kid who maybe isn't as cool as the other one. And yes, it's escalated. We've seen more and more of these type of events, but the why and the how, we can consider lots of reasons, but do any of us really know that what leads up to this?
I mean, I think there's also tremendous peer pressure.
Yeah.
We feel peer pressure as adults. That's nothing compared to the pressure a kid feels in high school or middle school to fit in, to be with the cool crowd. Frankly, this is harmful to a lot of kids who are different and different in ways that enrich us. I mean, the kid who's the artist, the kid that's the poet, the kid that's the musician or the writer, or the kid that's gay or lesbian, or the kid that is transgender, or maybe even a kid with disability, or whatever it is. The differences among us, it could obviously be in a very white area, the black kid, in a very black area, the white kid, a Latino kid, anyone that's different for any reason. is likely to be picked on. And I guess my question is, as we celebrate diversity in America, as we should celebrate diversity, how do we inculcate that in kids? And I actually think it can be. I think you could teach a child to see someone that's different and say, hey, wow, that's really cool. Oh, you're from a different culture? Oh, tell me about your culture. Tell me about your religion. Tell me about your traditions. And see that as, wow, that's something new and different and interesting, and not, oh, wow, that's something that's different and awful and horrific. I think we can train kids that way.
I think so too, and I think part of it will come as our society as a whole becomes more multicultural. I mean, I think we somehow have to get a handle on this violence and the bullying in schools. But as more kids are exposed to that earlier on, I think that there won't be so many of those differences. You know, I went to school in South Florida, and there were, in my kindergarten class, there were 17 different countries represented.
Wow.
17 different countries. So from that early age, I was exposed to all different kinds of cultures, religions, race, and I found that growing up, I didn't look at people differently as badly. So maybe that's something that comes with time.
And how much of this is gender? I mean, just boys and girls, men and women, men considering women to be, I mean, this poor young woman, this victim, was treated like a thing, like a possession, like I can't think of enough negative words. I mean, she was treated as this object to play with rather than a human being. Do you think that feminism helps to disrupt these ideas? Or is this something that we're just going to see across all cultures? I mean, how do you teach young boys to respect young girls?
Well, that last question, I wish I knew, but I think it's time and education. It's understanding that, gender or race or whatever, input, whatever diverse factor here is still equal. You know, we saw the same thing, that it was okay to treat black people like this in the South. That's how children and teenagers grew up, that it was okay because they were different. They were not human in the eyes of white people in the South. And the same thing was culturally. Women are the same, in the same boat. You know, for 1,000 years they were property, with a few exceptions, like in Egypt and the rare occasion. But they were part of the dowry that went from brother and father to husband and sons. They were an item, simply there for procreation and serving men's needs. And it's going to take a long time, just genetically, to get those genes, those traits out of our society.
Here's, I guess, what I'd like to teach kids, and I think it's a solid progressive value. I think when you teach people about justice and fairness, here's the thing. There's always going to be rotten, violent people on this planet. I wish it weren't true, but I'm not so naive as to think that there won't always be evil, violent people on the planet. What strikes me in that way is the football players, as horrible as they were, actually, sadly, surprised me less than the other kids around who didn't call their parents or 911 or the police. To me, part of it, this is something that can be taught to young men as well. Chivalry sometimes gets a bad word, particularly to the extent that chivalry means putting women down or treating women as less than or inferior. That's a terrible thing, and feminism is rightly helping to end it. But the extent that the chivalry means protecting those that are in trouble, protecting someone who is getting hurt, protecting a victim. It could be a man protecting a woman. It could be protecting a man that's in trouble. It could be a woman protecting another woman. It doesn't have to be sexist to say that protecting the weak should be seen as a badge of honor. We stand up, or at least we properly should stand up. You're in the metro in Washington, D.C., and an elderly person comes and they need a place to sit. Most people, I would think, would stand up and let the elderly person sit. That's chivalrous. It's not a male-female thing. It's just saying that we recognize, hey, I'm strong enough to stand up, and you need to sit down. I think we can teach that value and wear it as a badge of honor, even if you have to appeal a little bit of machoism to say, hey, I'm strong enough that I know that it's part of my duty to protect people who are suffering, who are victims here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about equality. Think about the LGBT struggle going on right now. As more and more people see that their family member, their friend, their coworker comes out, and they realize that, hey, somebody I love is impacted by these horrific discriminatory laws, and they realize that they're wrong. It's the same thing when your sister is, God forbid, victimized,
right,
or assaulted, or your nephew is bullied in school, or your next door neighbor who maybe is Muslim or African American gets picked on or protested because of their color, their religion, etc. As people see that this person is equal to me and they're not being treated equally, hopefully our society can change. I mean, I like to think that we're better than this.
It's all about understanding that we're all brothers and sisters here. I tell you what, you give me a nice segue to the discussion about the Supreme Court's ruling, or at least their oral arguments. They haven't given their ruling yet. They won't do that till June, on the case of marriage equality. And I want to segue to that. First, let's take a break and give our callers a chance to join the discussion if they want, with Danielle and me. This is Mark Levine. This is the Inside Scoop. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797, 202-889-9797, and comment and say anything you wish, agree or disagree. We want to hear from you. This is Mark Levine. I'll be right back with Danielle from Talking Left right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. And my interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls, that Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell. You let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
You're listening to WPWC.
This is Mark Levine. I've got on the line a fellow talk show host with We Act Radio. Her name is Danielle. She's on Talking Left, and your show is right before mine, I think. Right, Danielle?
Yes, we are 9 to noon Eastern on Sundays, and always available for podcast for free over at talkingleft.com.
Terrific, and you'll have to check her out. I listen to Danielle and Shane talk right before my show begins, so I'm certainly used to a very good show, and I appreciate that. Danielle, I want to move on and talk about the oral arguments this week because they were historic. I think there are people, it's not hard for me to remember a time. When the Defense of Marriage Act was passed, it wasn't that long ago. It was only 17 years ago, at a time when there was no marriage equality, no same-sex marriage. I don't think it was anywhere in the world at that time. Maybe in the Netherlands, I'm not sure. It definitely wasn't in the United States, and the ideas seemed far-fetched. And it actually, moral disapproval of homosexuals was so common that that's exactly the language they used in the House report on the Defense of Marriage Act. They said, we want to show moral disapproval of homosexuals. And yet 17 years later, when Justice Kagan quoted from that exact same House report, there was a murmuring in the courtroom like, oh my God, I can't believe anyone ever said that. And I think that's because the culture, the polls, the people of America have changed dramatically in 17 years. You now have, in the latest poll, 58% of Americans support marriage equality, when 2/3 were against it just 10 years ago. And among young people, people under 30, 81%, that's astonishing. I can't think of anything 81% of Americans agree on. 81% of Americans under 30 of voting age, so Americans between 18 and 30, believe, yeah, everyone should have a right to get married, and they don't even understand why it's an issue. What do you think has caused the dramatic shift in just 20 years about people's approval of gay rights?
Well, I think there's definitely been a big fight for equality from the LGBT movement, but it's mainly because people, our brothers and sisters had the courage to come out and say, hey, I'm here, I'm your, sibling, I'm your aunt, I'm your coworker, I'm your child, and I'm gay. And that, it gives you goosebumps to honestly think about the courage that it takes for somebody to do that. And if you really are so soulless that you could see somebody struggling with that difficult task of telling their friends and family members and just hoping for acceptance and having the bravery to do it anyway, and that doesn't move you to change your opinion, then something is wrong with you internally. You are broken.
Well, we saw that recently with Senator Portman of Ohio. I mean, his son came out, and in doing so, he changed his whole view. And I definitely think people are coming out more in that spirit, and because I don't want to be accused of having any less courage than other people in America. A lot of my listeners don't know that I'm gay. Some know, some don't know. But I think it is important to come out, and I'm someone who believes in coming out. And what's fascinating is it's an intentionally personal decision. It is a tough choice. You don't want people judging you in a different way. For me, I want to be judged as a talk show host, as a constitutional lawyer, as a former congressional attorney, all the things that I do on air, and I don't want to be seen as, oh, he's the gay talk show host. I mean, I am gay and I am a talk show host, but there's a lot more to me than that as well. There's a lot, and so I think that people don't want to be pegged in a corner, and yet I understand those pressures. I feel those pressures. I do think it's important to come out, and I'm someone that has strongly advocated for other people to come out. When Anderson Cooper came out, and I knew he was gay, frankly, most people in the industry knew he was gay for at least 10 years, but when he came out and announced it to the public, that was something different. And I should say this, there are two United States senators that are in the closet. I won't name them because it's not my role to out them. Tammy Baldwin, of course, is an openly gay senator, and she's a great person. I know Tammy personally, and she's a wonderful, wonderful person and a wonderful senator. There are two senators, one Democratic, one Republican, that are both in the closet. And I should say this about the Democrat. This senator lives in a very progressive blue state. This senator should come out of the closet. And if that senator is listening to me now, and I'm very carefully avoiding he or she, but that senator should come out because it serves as a role model to other people. And I think the more people come out, the easier it is to do. Just for example, in sports, that was considered the last place. Football, we just talked about football, such a macho sport, the last place for someone to come out. It's rumored, and I don't know if it's true, but it's rumored that within the next week we're going to have an NFL player, the first ever, come out of the closet. And that's going to be really difficult for him. And, Godspeed to him, because the more people come out, the more people know people who are gay, the easier it is for people to say, oh, yeah, that's an ordinary human being. Why shouldn't they have equal rights under the law?
Yeah, it's certainly time. That is a really tough one, especially with all the recent news of the NFL being so homophobic. But I salute whoever it is and support them. And, I will definitely, I'm a football fan. I am a football watcher.
So you'll know.
So I will definitely have some more support for that team.
Yeah, I think it started when the kicker, I forgot his first name. His last name's Clue. I don't know what, Chris, is that his name? Came out very strongly in support of marriage equality. He's not gay, but he's very supportive. And I think it's also important for straight people to come out as supportive. Like this, I mean, he made it easier for whoever the person is in the NFL that's going to come out. I'm very proud of people like that. I have actually a cousin who in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm very proud of her. She started the second gay-straight alliance ever in a Nashville high school. Now, she's straight, but she understood the need. And let's face it, gay teens, gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender teens, are 3 to 4 times more likely to commit suicide than straight teens. And that's because they feel they're alone. That's because they feel there's no one out to support them. And so when straight people come up and say, well, of course I believe in equality under the law, why wouldn't I? Of course I will reach out and help my fellow human beings who are being persecuted. That helps everybody come along. So it's not just incumbent upon, and I think it is, gay and lesbian and bisexual transgender people to come out and say who they are and be very brave. It's also incumbent among straight people to come out as being very supportive, so that if you do have a child, you do have a brother, a sister, a cousin, a friend who's gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, they can feel safe with you, and you can help make this world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, just as a woman, that some of my gay male best friends are the best friends that I've ever had throughout my entire life. And it's no stereotype that they are just the most wonderful, loving, amazing, brave people that I have had
not all of us
throughout
are.
my life.
Not all of us are, but most of us. I'll take that. I have my own Grace myself. She called me Will. I call her Grace, and we're very close, and we share all kinds of things together. But see, that's what makes humanity great, is all the differences among us, and it goes back to what we were saying ahead of time. It has to be celebrated. So to me, this Supreme Court hearing, I got to say, I did think it was coming. I did think we'd prevail. I still think we'll prevail. If we don't prevail in June, there's going to be some gay riots, I'm afraid to say, and not just from gay people. But I think we're going to prevail in California. I think DOMA is going to be struck down. DOMA, of course, is what makes marriages in Massachusetts and Connecticut and D.C. and Iowa, wherever they're legal, the equivalent of what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg called skim milk. They're not. They're incomplete. They give you marriage rights at the state level, but none of the marriage rights at the federal level, whether it be income tax filing or Social Security benefits or disability benefits. In the case before the Supreme Court, a woman who had been married to her partner for 40 some odd years, I think, maybe even longer. I know that she's in her
44
80s.
years.
44 years. There you go. Yep. Had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes that she wouldn't have to pay if she were straight when her wife died. And it's like, now wait, if you're a man and your wife dies, you don't pay any taxes. But if you're a woman and your wife dies, you have to pay hundreds of thousands. To me, that's the clearest case of inequality. And if anything can appeal to conservative justices, I would think it'd be a tax bill, because they hate taxes.
You would think so, but Chief Justice John Roberts obviously was looking for some of his own moral coverage in referring to this alleged gay lobby. You know, it was obviously he was looking for some type of cover for when he votes against it. You know, why should he not cave to the pressure of the so-called gay lobby, which anybody who lives in one of the 30-plus states that still isn't allowed to marry the person that they love will adamantly tell you that the LGBT movement obviously doesn't have the political power that Chief Justice John Roberts thinks that they have.
Here's the thing, all right? Are there groups that advocate for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender rights? Of course there are. Just like there's always been groups, at least since the NAACP was formed at the turn of the last century, and actually even before then, that advocated for racial equality. Just because the NAACP existed in 1903 does not mean blacks were treated equally in 1903. The problem with leaving all of this to the political branches is the problem with any time you have the tyranny of the majority. The reason we have a Bill of Rights, the reason we have a 14th Amendment, the reason I carry my Constitution wherever I go and look up equal protection under the laws, is that sometimes the majority discriminates against the minority. And yes, I'm very proud of Massachusetts and Maryland and D.C. and Iowa and the New England states and Iowa and Washington for giving marriage equality. But my home state of Virginia doesn't have marriage equality. The place where I grew up, Tennessee, doesn't have marriage equality. I guarantee you the gay people there want it just as much as anywhere else in the country, but they don't have the political power to do so. So just because a gay lobby, as it were, exists far less powerful than the oil lobby or the gun lobby or the corporate lobby. But just because people band together and advocate for their political rights doesn't mean they automatically win. And Chief Justice Roberts should know that. He happens to have a gay cousin and who has made very clear that her cousin knows that she's gay. And she has a long-term partner, and good for her for coming out as Chief Justice Roberts' cousin. I think it was Stephen Colbert that said that's going to be a very awkward Easter or Christmas. But it should be awkward. It should be awkward. It should be tough for you to look at your cousin in the eye and say, sorry, I don't think that you're equal in human dignity to me, and you deserve to live a second-class citizenship. It's very hard to tell someone that to their face, and it should be hard.
Absolutely. He should have to live with that decision. And I think that's what his whole argument of the political power of, he used the term politicians are falling all over themselves to legalize gay marriage. Really?
Democrats are.
Then why are there still 30 states that don't allow gay marriage? Why is it still possible to be fired in many of the states in our country just for being gay?
That's another thing that I don't think is getting enough discussion. Obviously, I support marriage equality, as do you, Danielle. But the Employment Non-Discrimination Act actually almost passed in 1996. At the same time they passed the Defense of Marriage Act, they failed by one vote. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act. I remember Al Gore was vice president. He was ready to cast the deciding vote. It lost 50-49. This act, which is still not law, says very simply you can't be fired for being gay. And what's interesting, if you poll Americans all across the nation and you ask them, can you be fired for being gay? They all say no. They think that's already the law. They think because they know you can't be fired for being black or for being a woman or for being a different religion. They know about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. They may not know what it's called, but they assume that you can't be fired for being gay. And that is true in some states, but it isn't true in many states. To this day, Cracker Barrel went to its employees and said, sorry, you're gay, we're firing you. And they could do that, and it was legal. And people don't even know that happens. And that's another very important piece of legislation, that it's not just marriage equality. It should be equal protection under the law in all its aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully someday in our country, we won't have to worry about people, warranting protected class status. But the fact is, they still do. They meet that heightened scrutiny requirement under the protected class status because of perpetual, ongoing, institutionalized racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. throughout this country. We can be better than this, but we need legislation. We need Supreme Court justices. We need leaders that recognize this fight and push it the right way, not people who are still, putting up these anti-equality pieces of legislation through state after state, just like the anti-abortion. These are the same men, white men,
right,
that wouldn't vote for equal pay for equal work. They
right,
wouldn't vote for the Violence Against Women Act.
Right.
They're all putting up voter ID laws which disproportionately affect minorities.
Right.
And, of course, they're against gay marriage. That only leaves one group of people that they support: straight, or at least publicly straight, white men.
And not just straight white men, but older straight white men. One of the
Yes.
really powerful things about, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with being older straight white men. Some of my best friends
go for
are
it.
older straight white men. It's only if you're an older straight white male, I should probably say evangelical Christian, who doesn't want rights for other people, is non-union. I mean, you're talking about a very, very tiny box of people. But one of the things I want to point out is that it is the elderly, because the youth gets it. And what's so fascinating about gay rights is I don't think you can find any other issue in the country that has as strong an age divide as this issue. You find that, like I said, 81% of Americans under 30 say, yeah, what's the deal with marriage equality? Of course. Why wouldn't we have it? Over 60, people over 70, even some liberals, frankly, have some problems with it if they're over 70. Although what the recent poll in the Washington Post showed, to my pleasure, actually, is that actually older Democrats are now getting it. That's actually the biggest change in just 5 years. You found 2/3 of Democrats over 60 opposed marriage equality just 5 years ago, and now 2/3 support it. So now you have a case where young people of all political groups support it. Democrats Democrats of all ages support it. It's just older Republicans that still have to be convinced. And the nice thing is that you look at a guy like Rob Portman, senator from Ohio, and his own son comes out. And he's like, oh, wait, yeah, these are real people. This is my son. I guess I can't discriminate. You look at a guy as evil and terrible as Dick Cheney. And I don't think there's many progressives that can ever say any kind word about Dick Cheney for good reason. He's an awful human being for a lot of reasons. But he happens to have a gay daughter. And lo and behold, apparently when you have a gay child, it's really hard to hate them and want them as second-class citizens. When even Dick Cheney can be persuaded, it seems to me this is an issue that it's just a matter of time. I predict, by the way, 10 years from now, marriage equality will be in every one of the 50 states. Absolutely.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Mark, hopefully that is the case. And, hopefully we have a lot of strong, important fights going on right now for, voting rights,
sure,
for women's rights, for LGBT rights, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
That's true.
Everybody criticizes progressives for being, getting progressives to line up around one issue is like herding cats. Well, that's because there's a lot of important issues, but we're smart enough to tackle them all at once because that's what we do. We don't give up on equal rights. We don't give up on civil rights, and we sure as heck don't give up on our right to participate in the democratic process.
Right. All for one, one for all. That's the thing. Whether your issue is environmentalism or voting rights or civil rights, whether your issue is rights for workers, protecting unions, whether your issue is ending harmful drug legislation or immigration, there's a whole bunch of progressive issues. But if we divide it up and say, well, only Latinos care about immigration, only the gay people care about gay rights, only the tree huggers care about environmentalism, then they're all minorities. When we all combine together, we find we're the overwhelming majority. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll have more with Danielle, or actually, I think I got to let Danielle go, but I'll have more of the Inside Scoop. If you want to call in at 202-889-9797. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be right back with more of the Inside Scoop right after this.
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM. WeActRadio.com.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, The Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM. WeActRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Just got a couple minutes left. I've been reading on Twitter all the various comments on my appearance on Fox on should teachers be armed with guns. And by the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Mark Levine Talk, MarkLevineTalk. By all means, comment and let me know what you think. And you can also post your comments on my website. It's a little more permanent place than on Twitter. You know, Twitter, it goes off into the Twitter sphere. Is that a word? But if you go to marklevinetalk.com, you can post your comments on any of my shows, whether it's the one on Fox or today's Inside Scoop or Raucous Caucus, or there's actually a whole lot of information there. I'd like you to check it out. I just want to close by saying this. It seems to me that progressives are often pessimists. We're often rightly complaining about all the horrors that exist in our society, and we should. It is the role of progressives to alert humanity to the horrors going on in the world so we can fix them. And that's true whether it's the war in Syria, which I think is a horrific thing that we need to do our best to stop, to poverty at home or mistreatment of people or gun violence or, we talked about gay teens committing suicide, even pointing out what I have about the mistreatment of teens in institutional centers. I just want to say one more time, the SIA Convention, Survivors of Institutional Abuse Convention is occurring this weekend right here in Washington, D.C. You can find more information on that. Just Google SIA, S-I-A, Convention 2013. I'll be speaking there, and if you want to support the cause of stopping horrible treatment of American teenage kids in these centers, I hope you'll take a look and support this fine organization. But let me just close by saying this. We often bring up the bad stuff. We're often the Cassandras of the world. We go and we point out all these bad things are happening. But sometimes when we fix things, we can point out good things. I think background checks is going to succeed. Yeah, we're not getting the reduction in high-capacity magazines, which I'd like to also see, so the job is not finished. But just the fact that every crazy or insane or violent person is going to have to go through a background check in America, that's going to save some lives. The Supreme Court will, I think, rule positively on marriage equality. They will say that gay people have the same rights under the law as straight people. That's coming down. That's positive news. So let me, on this Easter day, whether you celebrate Easter or Passover as I do, which of course is a celebration of freedom, let's reflect on the positive things, because we are making progress. We do have a Democratic president. He ain't perfect, to be sure, but a lot better than when George Bush was in office. The economy is getting better, and we are slowly learning to protect people's civil rights. And if you just look at the polls on GLBT equality, you can see that American minds are changing. So while we're always on Liberal Talk Radio going to point out the negative stuff, let's also look and see how far we've come. Because when you see how far we've come, you see how much we can still achieve in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead. This is Mark Levine. Come join me next week on We Act Radio, AM 1480. Raucous Caucus at noon, Inside Scoop It at 1. For now, though, I'm going to have to sign off. See you next week.